You know, every single thought you have, every move you make, it all comes down to this one tiny, unbelievably fast electrical signal. Today, we're going to dive deep into that fundamental spark that powers our entire nervous system. We're talking about the action potential.
So what is that spark, really? I mean, how does the cell actually create an electrical signal that turns into a thought, or a feeling, or even a command to move a muscle? That's the huge question we're unpacking right now.
Okay, so to understand the action, we first have to understand, well, the inaction. We've got to start with a neuron that's just waiting. It's sitting there quietly before any signal shows up. This is its default state. It's at rest mode.
Check out this number, -70 millivolts. That is the actual electrical charge inside a typical neuron when it's just hanging out. Notice, it's not zero, right? It's polarized. It's holding on to this tiny bit of negative charge. It's kind of like a coiled spring, just full of potential energy, waiting to be released.
So this baseline electrical charge, it's got a name, the resting membrane potential. You can think of it as the starting line for everything that's about to happen. The neuron holds itself in this negative state on purpose, just waiting for the right trigger.
And that, right there, brings us to the tipping point, the inciting incident of our little story here. Something has to happen to push this resting neuron into action. A signal has to arrive and completely change the game. Well, that trigger comes in the form of these little chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. When they hook up to the neuron, they open these tiny channels, and that lets positive charges start to trickle in. And as that happens, the inside of the cell starts to become less negative. It's a process we call depolarization. You can almost see that electrical charge starting to creep up from its cozy -70 millivolt home.
And this right here, this is the magic number. As the neuron depolarizes, it's heading toward -55 millivolts. I want you to think of this as the absolute point of no return. The fuse has just been lit.
This critical point is called the threshold potential. And here's the deal. If the incoming signals aren't strong enough to push the neuron all the way up to this -55 level, nothing happens. It's just a false alarm. But if it crosses that threshold, oh man, everything changes in an instant.
Because once that threshold is crossed, we get the main event, the big show. It's this all-or-nothing, super dramatic firing of the neuron signal. This is the action potential.
The second we hit -55 millivolts, it's like a dam breaks. A flood of sodium channels burst open. These positively charged particles, sodium ions, just rush into the cell. This causes a massive and ridiculously fast reversal of the charge. I mean, the neuron's internal charge doesn't just go to zero, it literally skyrockets way up into positive territory. So this really breaks down the two key players in this whole drama. First, you've got the rising phase. That's the sodium ions rushing in, creating that huge positive spike we just talked about. But then, right at the peak, a whole different set of channels open up. That kicks off the falling phase, where potassium ions rush out of the cell, which quickly brings the charge crashing back down and starts to reset everything.
But wait, the story isn't quite over yet. After firing, the neuron can't just go again immediately. It's not a machine gun. It needs a quick moment to reset itself, to get back to its starting position so it's ready for the next signal.
And this reset phase is interesting. It involves a little overshoot. The neuron actually dips down and becomes even more negative than when it was resting, just for a brief moment. This is called the refractory period. Think of it like a quick system reboot. It's super important because it makes sure the signal only travels in one direction and guarantees the neuron is properly reset before it can even think about firing again. Okay, let's do a quick recap. We can see the whole journey right here. Step 1, we start at rest, nice and quiet. Then, a stimulus comes along and pushes us to that critical threshold. That triggers the rising phase. Boom, sodium rushes in. Then, the falling phase, as potassium rushes out. We get that brief refractory period where it overshoots a little bit, and finally, we're back to rest, all recharged and ready for the next signal. Simple as that. So, you might be asking, why does a neuron go through all this trouble? What's the ultimate goal of creating this insane electrical spike? Well, the goal is actually really simple. It's all about passing a message along. See, this electrical spike isn't just a single event that happens in one spot. No way. It's a wave of energy that actually travels, or propagates, all the way down the entire length of the neuron, from one end to the other. It's carrying that information with it like a runner carrying a torch. And when this wave of electricity finally reaches the very end of the neuron, it triggers the final, crucial step.
It causes the release of those chemical neurotransmitters we talked about at the beginning. They then shoot across a tiny gap to the next neuron in the chain, and guess what? The whole process starts all over again.
And just like that, we're full circle. You know, one of our sources just sums this up perfectly. It says the action potential is a, quote, momentary reversal of membrane potential that is the basis for electrical signaling within neurons. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. From a simple reflex like pulling your hand from a hot stove to your most complex, abstract thoughts, it all begins with this one tiny spark.
So I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on. We've established that the action potential is an all-or-nothing deal, right? Every single spike is basically the same size and the same shape. So if that's true, how in the world does your brain tell the difference between a signal for, say, the color red and the signal for the sound of a bell? The answer, it turns out, isn't in the spark itself, but in where it comes from and where it's going. And that, well, that's a story for another time.